Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that Calgary is on Treaty 7 territory, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, as well as the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda nations of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley. This area has deep importance to the people of the Métis Nation of Alberta Treaty Region 3. I'm Jeremy Nixon, the MLA for Calgary-Klein, and it is a great honor for me to be able to be here today. Today we are announcing the funding that has been made for completing this new space in Calgary for the Calgary Centre for Newcomers possible. I also want to acknowledge that Minister Pon, Minister Panda, Minister Orr, Minister Yaseen, as well as MLA Amory and MLA Peter Singh are here today. So without further ado, it is my great honor and privilege to be able to welcome our Premier Jason Kenney, to the podium.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, and to all of my colleagues, MLAs and ministers who are joining us here today at the Centre for Newcomers. Thank you to the Centre for Newcomers for welcoming us to this expanded and improved space that's going to help newcomers in their Alberta success story achieve their dreams. I have an important announcement about that, but before I get to it, I would need to address some urgent developments at the border with respect to the blockade at Coutts. A few minutes ago, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police issued the following statement. The Alberta RCMP recently became aware of a small organized group within the larger Coutts protest. Information was received that this group had access to a cache of firearms with a large quantity of ammunition. The group was said to have a willingness to use force against the police if any attempts were made to disrupt the blockade. This resulted in an immediate and complex investigation to determine the extent of the threat and criminal organization. As a result of this investigation, the Alberta RCMP executed a search warrant during the early hours of February 14th, that's this morning, on 3 trailers associated with this criminal organization. This resulted in the arrest and detainment of 11 individuals. As a result of these search warrants, the following was seized: 13 guns, handguns, 13 long guns, in addition, handguns, multiple sets of body armor, a machete, a large quantity of ammunition, I was told thousands of rounds, and high-capacity magazines. An example of the militant mindset of a small segment of the protest is that earlier in the evening, at approximately 8 p.m. last night, Sunday, a large farm tractor and a semi-truck, both involved in the blockade, attempted to ram a police vehicle. The police officer was able to reposition and avoid the collision. RCMP officers followed the suspects to a location where the protesters were gathered. The driver of the tractor was identified, and we are actively working to locate him so that he can be taken into custody. The Alberta RCMP have seized the farm tractor and semi-truck involved in the incident. The RCMP wants to emphasize that our primary goal throughout this event has been and will continue to be the safety of the public as well as our officers. The RCMP will resume efforts to end the illegal blockade, which has prevented access to the Coutts border. We encourage all participants who are involved in this illegal action to leave immediately or relocate to the designated site for the legal protest. And the RCMP will provide further updates when they become available. I'd just like to thank the RCMP for their diligent investigation and the successful execution of this enforcement action. We're very happy that no one was harmed. All of their officers are safe. And the enforcement action continues today. I know that many Albertans, myself foremost, have been frustrated with the ongoing blockade, the interruption of other people's lives, the violation of other people's rights, the safety hazard that this represents, and we'll be very distressed to learn about this small group that apparently have had violent intent that were involved and have been identified and now detained. This underscores the severity of what has been happening. And to those who have been impatient about enforcement, I ask them to understand that this investigation has been ongoing over the past week, and the RCMP obviously did not want to escalate the situation that could provoke potential violence until they had a tactical plan in place at the appropriate time to take enforcement action and to seize these weapons, as they've done early this morning. And so now that the RCMP has successfully resolved this potential threat, they will proceed, I'm informed, with enforcement against others who are involved in the blockade at and around Coutts. The Government of Alberta has successfully procured all of the necessary heavy equipment and service to operate that equipment to assist the police in removing commercial vehicles and other vehicles that may be blocking our highways. Throughout all of this, it's important to underscore that traffic across the Alberta-Montana border has operated largely unimpeded because we have 6 ports of entry between Alberta and Montana, 5 of which have continued to operate according to either normal or, in fact, extended hours. I'd like to thank the Canada Border Services Agency and the United States Customs and Border Protection Agency for their diligent cooperation in extending hours and providing those services. And so my message to those who are still involved in the blockade at Coutts is that you know you have not closed the border. All you've done is to inconvenience thousands and thousands of hardworking truckers who have been trying to do their job to make a living, just forcing them to drive longer distances for no point. You've sent your message. We encourage people to continue to express their views in a lawful and peaceful way, but the ongoing blockade of our borders and our highways at Coutts will no longer be tolerated. And now that this very delicate security challenge has been resolved successfully by the police, as I say, broader enforcement measures will commence, and of course the Government of Alberta will be there to support that every step of the way. So with that said, on happier news, I'm really delighted to be here at the Centre for Newcomers, which is a critically important organization in our community. You know, Alberta owes so much to those who've come here from every part of the world with their dreams and talents, their work ethic, their entrepreneurial spirit, to pursue opportunity, to achieve their potential, to contribute to our economy and our society in so many rich ways. And, you know, here, the Centre for Newcomers is one of many settlement organizations that are a helping hand to immigrants who arrive here, often facing big barriers to integration, how to get that first job, how to get their credentials, education, and skills recognized in the Canadian workforce or from professional regulators, how to learn how the Canadian workforce operates, how to get the kids enrolled in school, how to improve their English language skills, and so much more. There is a fantastic network of settlement organizations that are supported by governments and by voluntary donors and volunteers that do the practical work every single day to pave the way to success for immigrants to Alberta. And we owe all of those newcomers so much, which is why later this week I will be thrilled to host the first ever annual Premier's Summit for Fairness for Newcomers. This is something we committed to do in the 2019 election platform as part of our Fairness for Newcomers action plan. For too long, too many highly skilled and experienced immigrants have arrived in Canada, in Alberta, only to face underemployment, often stuck at the bottom of the labor market in survival jobs as their skills atrophy, as they are frustrated, as they burn through their savings, and often end up wondering why they came here at all because of the difficulty in getting their education, skills, and credentials recognized by Alberta regulators and Alberta employers. We have a moral obligation and an economic imperative to do everything we can to break down those barriers, to stop the gatekeeping that too often has characterized the approach of regulatory bodies to immigrant professionals and tradespeople. And that's what the Action Plan for Fairness for Newcomers is all about. It's why in 2019 we kept our commitment to bring in the Fair Registration Practices Act to give clear legal direction to those regulators of professions that they must give a fast and fair process to applicants for licensure for credential recognition. The Summit for Fairness for Newcomers I'll be hosting this week is taking another step in that direction, as is the creation of the Fairness for Newcomers Office in the Department of Labor and Immigration, as is the mentorship program that we have launched, and many more actions. This summit will give us an opportunity, will give newcomers an opportunity to speak truth to power, to speak to the regulatory bodies that have too often created unreasonable bureaucratic red tape process to get their credentials recognized. It will be an opportunity to speak to employers, for immigrants, to speak to employers who have sometimes failed properly to recognize the tremendous skills and experience of immigrants to Canada. It will be an opportunity for newcomers who have broken through those barriers and gone on to great success to share their encouraging stories as mentors to newcomers who are still facing those challenges. And I think of one such success story, my colleague you'll hear from today, Minister Mohammed Yaseen. And so it will also be a chance for employers to learn about how they can address their labor and skill shortages by better utilizing the skills and more quickly recognizing the credentials and education of immigrants. All of that, many of those programs, very importantly, are delivered by settlement organizations like the Calgary Centre for Newcomers. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here today to announce that the Government of Alberta is providing nearly $500,000 through a community grant to the Centre for Newcomers to help upgrade this facility into a sustainable community hub. One of many investments that we are making, which will be emphasized in the provincial budget on February 24th. So thank you again to the Centre for all the great work that you do. We hope that this expanded and improved facility will help thousands of new Albertans pave their path to success, to the fulfillment of their God-given potential. And thank you. And with that, we'll hear from Minister Orr.
Thank you very much, Premier, and hello everybody, and thank you truly for joining us here today to announce this incredible investment in Calgary Centre for Newcomers. I've been visiting with the staff and various people already, and incredible work happening here. This is a great investment for the province of Alberta, and it truly speaks to Alberta's past, to our present, and to our future realities. Immigration to our province today shows that Alberta is a beacon of hope for a better future that shines brightly, literally around the globe. And this is true especially for the cities, but quite frankly, I was really encouraged to hear that it also includes rural Alberta, which is part of my riding. There's a great contribution that immigrants contribute to the rural communities of Alberta as well. In return for a safe harbor, a new home, or a good job, newcomers to Alberta play a very significant role in our social and economic progress. When someone comes to a new country, to a new culture, they may not speak the language, may not have the right educational credentials, or may not have the connections, the network they need for success. Sometimes even to find people of their own community to help them out and give them guidance. And that's what the Centre for Newcomers is all about. That's where the work that happens here comes in. The Centre provides newcomers to Alberta with extraordinary resources and programs to support their success, and helps build bridges of friendship and professionalism across the cultures, across all the connections that need to happen for success. It's about the diversity and inclusion necessary for our province to grow and to thrive, as I said, both in the cities and in the rural areas. Our government knows it's important to share the wonderful cultures that make up the cultural tapestry of our province, and to support those who choose Alberta as their new home, a place to make a living and to raise their family. And that's why we are investing $485,000 in this new Centre for Newcomers to complete this facility upgrade. And as you can see, we're still a little bit in construction mode here, almost done. I feel quite at home here. I used to wear those hard hats and work with blueprints, and so this is a great place to be for me. And great to see that this center is almost finished, the renovations necessary for them to be able to move in. This funding will assist the center in completing this move to this new location, which will double the usable space they had from their old location and will enable it to expand its programs and its services to potentially 10,000 newcomers. Services such as their second language program, where newcomers can improve their ability to speak and understand, read and write in English. Settlement programs would provide orientation for newcomers to life in Alberta so they can start settling in and can develop personal and professional networks and connections, an opportunity to learn about the history and the culture of Alberta, career developments and job programs which offer newcomers workshops, job training, search and placements and other skills. And I understand right in this space where we're standing there'll be a restaurant, and they already have a catering company where some newcomers who would choose that direction can actually gain some job experience, job history here in Alberta, learn some skills, and be prepared to go out and find their own job after that. So with the upgrade, the centre will have the resources to become a sustainable hub housing 150 different partner agencies and groups that support the local community, and I'd even add the local economy. These collaborations provide a holistic approach to helping newcomers that is truly going to make their lives better, help them to build community connections and find work. History is an active process, one which needs active participants in order to make positive change. And as we are demonstrating here today, Alberta's government is among those active participants. We have made a commitment to diversity, and we back it up with our policies and our financial support. Because it takes more than just talking about diversity, it takes real action, which is what $485,000 is about. So I'm proud to be able to work alongside Anila, and Mark, also the chair of the board. He's here somewhere. I was speaking to him earlier. And the rest of the folks here at the centre in supporting newcomers, their families, and all families in this province. By working together, we will move history forward to make Alberta a place where we can all live in safety and acceptance and have the opportunity to succeed and prosper and share in that prosperity. So thank you very much, and I would like to now invite Associate Minister Yaseen up to provide remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orr, Premier, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is exciting to see a center for that serves newcomers getting an upgrade to its building. As Associate Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism, I meet regularly with newcomers to listen, learn from, and inform government's response to their challenges and hopes. I continue to be inspired by the hard work and creativity demonstrated by those I meet. Newcomers are starting businesses, contributing to their communities, and helping to build a more economically diverse province. And it's organizations like the Calgary Center for Newcomers that help newcomers take their first step to success. Making sure newcomers are set up for success is a priority for Alberta's government. In addition to the facilities grant announced today, Alberta's government provides funding to newcomers' organizations to help them offer settlement and language services. Most recently, we launched 2 new grant opportunities for newcomers serving organizations that deliver settlement and language supports and services for newcomers or career mentorship programming. When newcomers have the tools to support they need to succeed in the workplace and in their new communities, it enhances their well-being and allows them to fully contribute in society. This, in turn, makes Alberta a more diverse and inclusive place where everyone has an opportunity to thrive. The contributions of immigrants and newcomers will play a key role in Alberta's economic recovery. And the support they receive from organizations like the Calgary Center for Newcomers allows them to their full potential. Thank you for your tireless efforts to give newcomers a welcoming space and the support they need to begin pursuing their dreams. While your building may be new, and I know this for sure, your dedication to serving newcomers will remain constant. Thank you and congratulations. And now I invite Anila Lee Yuen, the CEO for the Center for Newcomers. Please welcome her.
Okay, hello and bonjour. Welcome to the Center for Newcomers. We're not absolutely ready yet, but we will be on April 1st, and we will be so excited to see our entire community here. We're so grateful for the support of the Government of Alberta to be able to have this place renovated so that we are able to welcome everyone here today. I was born and raised here in Treaty 7 in Calgary, Alberta. I come from a family of newcomers that arrived from 1963 to 1996, and I'm sure we're still going to have more family members arriving. They didn't necessarily, especially back in the 60s and 70s, have the same opportunities of getting this type of assistance in terms of the inclusion process that so many newcomers get to see today. And it wouldn't be possible without all of the support of our government in wanting to be able to welcome newcomers and have newcomers here. The Center for Newcomers, pre-COVID, when we were fully open, did see about 1,000 people come through our doors. With this new doubling of our facility footprint, we are estimating that we can welcome anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 people through our doors every single day, and bringing up the number of newcomers from 15,000 to anywhere from 20 to 25,000 newcomers every year that we can support. I wanted to really invite the entire community to come and see the facility once we're open April 1st, to be able to participate here, to meet newcomers, to welcome newcomers, to take in some talks and programs, to meet with your respective MLAs that are here. MLA Jeremy Nixon is the MLA for our area here. We'd love to be able to host him and have some coffee chats with newcomers and the rest of the constituents that live and breathe and play here, work here. So please do come and join us when we're open. We'd love to see you. We'd love to see all of our newcomers here. We think that this new facility is going to be a wonderful hub with the Calgary East Zone Newcomers Collaborative, with so many of our partner organizations working together, and with all of you Albertans that have made our newcomer journeys so much more productive and welcoming. Thank you so much. And I now have Emily Nixon.
Thank you, Anila, and thank you, CEO Lark, for your vision and for allowing us to be a part of that, and for the leadership in your community. I just wanted to thank you as well for not moving too far, that you're still here in Calgary-Klein, because it is a huge honor to be able to represent you and this community, and look forward to continuing to work together. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation. We will now open it up for question and answer, which will be moderated by Mr. Fleming. Thank you.
Thank you, MLA Nixon. We are just going to start from the floor today, since I'm seeing some journalists who showed up here in person. Please, before you ask your question, identify your name and the outlet you're with, as well as who you're directing your question to. And with that, we'll take the first question. Thanks, Harrison. Tyson with CTV, and this one is for the Premier, just in regards to, off the top what you mentioned in regards to Coutts. With videos circulating out there, of course, of protesters ramming police vehicles and what they alluded to in their press release, is that disturbing to see and have RCMP members having to deal with that down there? And kind of where are you moving forward with this to get these protesters to disperse? Because
they're dug in. They've got food and supplies for weeks, potentially months. So are we going to see a potential court injunction or the Civil Forfeiture Act used soon?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, it is very disturbing to see people involved in this protest ramming RCMP vehicles. It's not the first time. There was an incident at Checkpoint 10, about 15 kilometers north of Coutts, where a protester rammed through a blockade, narrowly missed a police officer. But what is more disturbing here is the discovery of a cache of weapons and a large cache of ammunition, and the intelligence gathered by the RCMP about a core group who apparently had violent intent. This is extremely concerning. And I think, look, let's be clear. There have been tens of thousands of Canadians involved in various protests over the past several weeks. And I am sure that the vast majority of them are law-abiding and peaceful Canadians. But what we now know at Coutts, following an exhaustive investigation from the RCMP, is that there is, at least in that case, a small cell of people who wanted to take this in a very dangerous and dark direction. So I once again would like to thank the RCMP for their diligence, their restraint. There's been a lot of efforts to politicize the situation at Coutts, demanding immediate enforcement over recent days. I understand that expectation, but it was important for the government to work with the RCMP to avoid further inflaming the situation until they could address the security risk posed by that potentially violent cell group. So this is deeply concerning, and I think it should send a message to all of the other folks who were not aware of that cell. This is not to paint them all with the same brush, not doing that. But this should send a message to the hundreds, perhaps thousands of other sympathizers who have been in and around the border area. Time to go home, right now.
You say that, but they have been dug in. They're not planning on leaving anytime soon. They'll continue to protest at both those points near Milk River and Coutts. So what more can be done? A court injunction, Civil Forfeiture Act. How do we get these people to move on? RCMP have told them to move, but they don't plan on moving.
Well, again, okay, first of all, you asked initially about an alternative protest site. We have worked with RCMP to provide for a safe protest site off of the highway, which proximate to Milk River. We've actually built an access for them to get into that site. And the RCMP tried very hard in the first week, in particular, of this blockade, to work with the folks involved to just be reasonable. And they took a very light hand with respect to enforcement, in part because they didn't want to inflame the situation. And I want to acknowledge that some cooler heads did prevail from time to time, allowing a north and southbound lane across the port of entry. But unfortunately, you're right, a lot of sympathizers have come down to the checkpoint to access, where the RCMP has established a checkpoint to limit people accessing the Coutts border crossing, and they've more or less camped out on the highway. And this has created a difficult enforcement situation for the RCMP. But I can just tell you that the reason there has not been more vigorous enforcement over the past week, there have been tickets issued, there has been police action on a prudent basis, but the reason there has not been more widespread and vigorous enforcement action was because we needed to get that potentially dangerous situation under control first. RCMP decided, and of course we agreed, that it would be imprudent to potentially escalate the situation through widespread enforcement action unless and until that cell had been neutralized. That's now happened, and so you can expect to see more widespread enforcement. I won't say it's going to be easy. Another issue that was at play was needing to get heavy equipment. It's no secret that some of the sympathizers and protesters have made threats, I understand sometimes violent threats, to tow truck and other heavy equipment operators not to cooperate with the police. But we have managed to overcome that challenge. The government of Alberta has worked hard over the past few days to procure all of the necessary heavy equipment and contractors to operate it. So the police, both RCMP and Alberta sheriffs, I am told, have the equipment they need to proceed. Now, when exactly and how they do it, that's an operational, tactical issue for them to determine, but they'll say more about that today.
Thank you, Premier. You can go ahead, Rick.
I have no idea whether I can take my mask off or not, so I'll keep it on just to be safe. Nice to see you, Premier, in person. This is somewhat related to Coutts, though not directly. You've talked about freedom-loving Albertans and your sympathy for them. You've talked about how you like restrictions as only the last resort. You've talked about, been fairly sympathetic to people. You've claimed to be very sympathetic to people who chafe against these restrictions. The restrictions are coming off. How do you feel when people are still protesting in Alberta after the vaccine passport is gone, after the masks, God willing, will be gone on March 1st, after other restrictions will be gone soon after that? I live in a neighborhood where they had the protests in Calgary, as if there's been no announcement by anybody. Yeah. How do you feel personally about the fact that people continue to protest despite the fact that, you've made some fairly significant announcements in the last few weeks?
Well, thanks, Rick. First of all, I get the deep frustration and I share it. Secondly, I have no problem with lawful, peaceful protest. It's part of our democracy. Third, our careful plan to get life back to normal is not based on anybody protesting. It's just based on the fact that restrictions are not needed now to protect the healthcare system, and the restrictions are damaging. The responsibility on governments is not to keep a restriction in place for 1 day longer than is absolutely necessary to protect the hospitals, and we are past that point. And that's what informed our decision, and we're doing it in a gradual way. Those protesters, they never wanted any, I think most of them wanted no measures at all. I think a lot of them, and they have every right, I respect them as citizens. I disagree with them on this point. I think a lot of them would be in the let her rip crowd, who either denied that COVID was a threat, have denied the real pressure on our hospitals, have denied the efficacy and safety of vaccines, and many of those protesters would have had us do absolutely nothing at this, which undoubtedly would have meant, at various points, exceeding the capacity of our healthcare system, pulling life support from people, and filling up the morgues. I don't think that would have been responsible. We have tried imperfectly to get a balanced approach. So I would say to them, look, you should celebrate, like everyone else, celebrate the fact that we're getting back to normal here. I do think they have an outstanding grievance with the Government of Canada. And the federal mandates, some of them being brought in, just as all the provinces in the rest of the world are lifting measures, not as responsible public health policy, but as bad political theater, as I've said to the Prime Minister as early as this morning. And so I would say to the Prime Minister, you don't bend to people breaking the law, but you don't bring in pointless restrictions as political theater, particularly at a combustible time like this. So I would say to those folks, celebrate what's happening in Alberta right now, and if you're angry, your problem is not the government of Alberta. You've got the NDP's Alberta Federation of Labour in court as we speak, trying to get a judge to force 6-year-olds to wear masks indefinitely. If you want to protest something, go down to the AFL headquarters and protest that, peacefully.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that last word. The second question sort of segues to that, and I really want to be clear about where you're at with this, because I'm sort of getting mixed signals, so you can clarify this today for everybody. Tomorrow, Calgary City Council is going to be debating whether to follow your lead on the mask bylaw, the province's lead, and we don't know where that's going. If they decide to continue with their city mask bylaw beyond March 1st, and your bylaw is, or your law is gone March 1st, Are you prepared to do anything to make sure that that doesn't happen?
We are looking at our options. We have not made a final decision. I think it's much better if the province, as we try to get life back to normal, has one simple, easy to understand, and consistent policy on public health. Public health is not a primary responsibility of municipal governments. It is a primary responsibility of the province. Our policy is informed by the data. The provincial government's responsible for the healthcare system. The Calgary City Council is not. And now, Rick, I will remind you, I'm sorry, you just opened yourself up to this, that you told me last Tuesday, that the next day you're going to have to get out your vaccine passport because Calgary was going to impose it. They didn't, and Edmonton's backed off as well, and I acknowledge and thank them for that. So and I'd like to believe that perhaps us tabling the possibility of changing the law to prohibit them from doing this played a role. And I think they also heard from their constituents who said enough already. So we're going to look at what develops here and make some decisions going forward. As I said to you before, we've tried to show some flexibility throughout COVID with municipalities, but at some point we've got to get past this. And really what concerns me is this is not, again, I don't think it's about public health. I think it's about politics. And that's I think, a real mistake for the cities to play it that way. I see that the mayor of Calgary looks to me like Stephen Carter is still working for her based on her tweet this weekend that accusing me of being a, quote, pot licker or something by lifting public health measures, personal insults. That sounds a lot more like politics than public health to me.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to see if there's any further questions from the floor before we turn ourselves over to the phones. And seeing none, we will have the operator put through our first caller.
Alex McCraig, Western producer.
Thanks for taking my call, and apologies to the Center for Newcomers.
Yes, I apologize to them as well. We didn't mean to come in here, but this happens. This has been happening for 2 years, where we do great announcements and COVID takes over. But go ahead. Yeah,
I'll just finish by saying apologies to the Center for Newcomers. I understand you do good work, and I've seen some of that work in action. This is a question for Premier Kenney. Last week you were describing the scene down in Coutts as 30 to 40 truckers. Currently, I don't think that was an accurate description of the scene down there. And I don't know if you know what the accurate situation is down there. Can you give a no BS analysis of what you see is going on there right now?
Well, what is going on there right now is a very dynamic situation because of the enforcement, tactical enforcement actions against this small group who had weapons. And so it's a very dynamic situation as we speak. But what I said was there were about 40 trucks at the border crossing itself, 40 commercial semis. And of course, that they've been joined by, from time to time, farm implements that have driven around the checkpoint 10 at the intersection of Highway 4 and 501, and some other people who've come in as sympathizers. But to the greatest extent possible, the RCMP and Alberta sheriffs have tried to control access to the border point. At the beginning of the Coutts so-called convoy protest, which was 16 days ago, on the Saturday 2 weeks ago, there were approximately 1,000 commercial vehicles, primarily semis, and heavy trucks that participated for several hours in a rolling convoy around around Coutts in the approach to the actual border crossing. But throughout the day, they did not actually block the routes, and they were cooperating with the RCMP. Later that night, about 90% of those 1,000 commercial truckers left. They went home. They made their point. Good for them. And about 100 stayed behind. And from that Saturday night through about mid the following week, that group of 100 periodically closed both lanes north and south, and periodically opened them up, is particularly for livestock trucks headed south. That group started to dissipate in number, and for roughly the past 9 days, the number of commercial vehicles either on the road at Coutts border crossing or at the parking lot in Smuggler's Saloon has been about 40, according to the daily situation reports and briefings I receive from the RCMP. And of course, north of there, about 16 kilometers north of there at checkpoint 10, there have been gatherings of commercial vehicles. I don't have the current exact count, but they've typically been about a dozen commercial vehicles, a few recreational vehicles, and a large number of passenger vehicles. Of course, those numbers have surged on the weekend, creating a carnival-like atmosphere with several hundred people, and those numbers tend to have abated during the weekdays. So that's my best I can do to summarize the situation as it's been based on the daily situation reports from the police.
And do you have a follow-up today, Alex?
Yeah, since I only got one follow-up, I'm only going to ask one question, but I thank you for the history of what's been going on. We've been covering it since it began. But what do you see as, Mr. Premier, what do you see as what are the current effects on the Alberta economy, specifically on the agricultural sector?
The effects, I think, are pretty modest. Coutts is an important border crossing, but it's not the only one. One of the key goals of Alberta's government, working with the police and sheriffs over the past 16 days, has been to ensure continued operation of the other 5 ports of entry, which include, of course, Wildhorse, Del Bonita, Carway, and 2 smaller ports. In fact, as I said, we worked with CBSA and U.S. CBPA, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, to increase service hours at Carway and Del Bonita, and also to get U.S. agriculture meat inspection to move, when Coutts was closed for a while, over to the Del Bonita port of entry. So I would say that early on in the first 3 days or so, there were about 35 Alberta truckers that were caught up in that convoy. They finally got out of there. They had no interest in participating. And we did, in the early days, have some packed meat that was spoiled because they couldn't get across the border and there was chaos. But I would say that we've been our Department of Agriculture and Transport has been communicating very closely with exporters, with Alberta Motor Transport Association, with the livestock producers, the packing plants, to make sure they're aware of where the best place is to go south. So I think that the export situation has been largely unaffected, but there is great frustration because just with the uncertainty and the inconvenience. Northbound has been a little more problematic because CBSA only has a inspection operation at Coutts, and they've been less flexible than U.S. CBPA in moving their inspectors. And that's why the Canada Border Services Agency issued their statement yesterday recommending that commercial vehicles requiring inspection go to the closest border points in Saskatchewan and BC. We're working with CBSA to try to improve that situation. So I would say overall net, the impact to the economy has been quite modest, but the inconvenience has been very great.
Okay, thanks, Premier. Operator, can you please connect our next caller?
John Braid, Calgary Herald.
Premier, there's another story going on here which has been kind of overtaken by the Coutts situation, the Emergencies Act, which we're going to hear from the Prime Minister on at 2:30 our time this afternoon. Could you tell me if you're in agreement with imposing the Emergencies Act, if you have any concern about the way it might be applied, because there's 2 ways it can be declared to be Canada-wide, and it can also be applied, stated to apply only to specific areas. I'm presuming, given your concerns about overarching federal power, that you would probably prefer it be applied only to specific area like Coutts, and whatever else might happen, I presume they can add locations. So can you give us, first of all, what your general view is, and then if it's going to happen, I guess it already is underway, how you would like to see it stated?
Sure. Thanks, Don. The view I have, which I conveyed to the Prime Minister during the Forum of First Ministers this morning, is that this is not necessary, at least for an Alberta context. We have all of the necessary statutory powers and operational capacity for enforcement now that we've resolved, now that the RCMP has resolved the militant cell, which could potentially have resulted in violence. And so we have now obtained the necessary equipment, and we have very strong laws in Alberta already. In a sense, in a strange sense, we anticipated a situation like this, because the Alberta Defense of Critical Infrastructure Act gives us sanctions that are quite similar to the court injunction obtained by Ontario to deal with Windsor last week. So we have the legal powers that we need. We have the operational resources that we need to enforce. And I think at this point for the federal government to reach in over top of us without offering anything in particular would frankly be unhelpful. I think we need to find ways to effectively enforce without escalating the situation. And I am concerned that there's a certain kind of person who will hear if the federal government proceeds with this, who will be further inflamed, and that could lead to a prolongation of some of these protests. So I think that on the balance, prudence dictates that at least here in Alberta, we give support to law enforcement to get the job done. Now, I can't speak about the situation in Ottawa, and so there may be local situations that are overwhelming local and provincial resources and legal authorities. And if the Government of Canada comes to that determination, I'll respect their decision, but we don't believe this is necessary in Alberta. We think it could actually be somewhat counterproductive.
And Don, do you have a follow-up today?
Well, we've had some evidence that after 2 weeks of criticism and everywhere from the Ambassador Bridge to Ottawa to here, that police activity is finally having an impact, and it sounds like it certainly is in Coutts. But I'm going to ask you once again, Premier, if it is to come in, and we don't know for this for sure, I take it, but I guess it is, would you like to see it targeted rather than just a nationwide declaration of a public order emergency?
We would prefer that the Emergency Act not be invoked, but if it is, we would very much prefer that it not be applied to Alberta. It's not needed. It could make the situation even more complicated, and that's what I told the Prime Minister this morning.
Okay. Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you please connect our next call?
Jason McGregor, Global Edmonton.
Hi there. This question is for the Premier. Premier, has your Chief of Staff or anyone from your team stepped down to run your leadership review campaign?
I apologize to the Centre for Newcomers. We're really going far afield now into politics. Yes, my Chief of Staff, Pam Livingston, has taken unpaid leave of absence to help with the upcoming campaign that leads to April the 9th. And I am very much looking forward to reaching out to grassroots Conservatives as they prepare for that special general meeting. There's obviously a very active campaign by some, including some associated with these protests, to undermine our party, and I think it's very important that there be an equally organized effort to maintain stability and the progress that our government has made. And so in the past few days, I've put together a small team, and Ms. Livingston will be leading that.
And Lisa, do you have a follow-up today?
Yes, I do. I guess what was the kind of hope or thinking behind having Pamela step down to run this? And I mean, it's obvious the priority, but what was your hopes, or what is the reasoning behind having her and your team members run this review campaign?
Well, we have a great team in the Premier's office, a small but mighty team led now by Acting Chief of Staff Janet McEachern, who until Friday was my Deputy Chief. And Pam has a long history as a grassroots Alberta Conservative. She knows thousands of people up and down the province, and is widely respected and has my complete confidence. So, as I say, we put together a small team because there will be an effort obviously, by many of the folks involved in these protests who have perhaps never belonged to a party before, to show up at that special general meeting and to use it as a platform for their anger about COVID measures over the past 2 years. So it's incumbent on mainstream Alberta Conservatives to also show up in large numbers to send a message about the importance of stability and maintaining a big tent mainstream coalition for the interests of the future of the province.
Thanks, Premier. And operator, can you please connect our last caller of the day? Hearing none, I think that wraps things up.
By the way, oddly enough, I'm doing a second news conference, I guess today, later this afternoon, with the Blackfoot First Nation. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, but I did want to thank once again, and I'm so sorry for the off-topic questions, but it doesn't matter because you're getting the work done here. You're getting the important funding, and we hope that you all will be participating in the Summit for Fairness for Newcomers. I'd also like to thank Ministers Yaseen and Orr and MLA Nixon and my other colleagues Prasad Panda and Mickey Ameri, Josephine Pond and Peter Singh for being here. I think just their presence demonstrates their passion for the success for newcomers. So this is going to be a very exciting summit, a lot of really exciting announcements about immigration reform, settlement support, and it's going to, I think, really put a spotlight on the importance of what you guys do every single day, which is to pave a way for the success for new Albertans and new Canadians. Thank you very much.